Hey everybody, let's talk about your next assignment and about what you're going to need to do in order to successfully complete the assignment. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is read chapter 9 because this chapter is specifically intended to give you a straight up to do list on how to move through the process of rhetorical analysis. Here are a few definitions from some fairly well known, very old rhetoricians and philosophers. My favorite is the first one. Rhetoric may be defined as the faculty of observing in any given case the available means of persuasion. When anybody asks you what the definition of rhetoric is, frequently they're thinking about this specific quote from Aristotle. These definitions are going to be very important as you work your way through the assignment. You want to make sure that you consider each of these things as you are finding the different ways that your author, in whatever resource it is that you're going to be analyzing, how they used them, or maybe they didn't use them. That's just as important as if they did. If they didn't use something, like let's say that your author has made an argument and has not made use of logos at all, and you think that that's a hole in their reasoning, a misstep in their argument. So you would point that out in your analysis. So make sure that you're familiar with each one of these things. The last one there, kairos, is the idea that timing is important in trying to persuade an audience. Frequently, we hear this very thing being discussed specifically around school shootings or large shootings, mass shootings as we get them so often here. What you'll hear is one of the talking heads on the news will say, oh, this is a failure of our government because we should have better gun laws. We should enforce the gun laws that we have, gun laws, gun things, blah, blah, blah. And the other side will say, oh, no, this is not the time to engage in this kind of discussion. But then they never actually find the time. And lo and behold, then we have another shooting, rinse and repeat. So kairos is one of those that is very easy to find and point to in some of these very specific arguments that you might be chasing down. I'm not going to read all of these things to you because they're directly from our textbook and from this week's reading, and you really need to know what these things mean so that when you do sit down to write your essay, you can point to these things in your text that you are analyzing and say, this was successfully used or this could have been used better. Rhetorical fallacies are something to be on the lookout for as well, specifically in your own writing, because you don't want to use these things. They're examples of very, very bad writing and very bad faith. Ad hominem, bait and switch, bandwagon, causal, hyperbole. These are all red flags that should say, okay, this person is not arguing in good faith. Here are some of the examples of people who have made use of these things in the past. Alex Jones made use of, I think, every rhetorical fallacy in the book, and was called on the carpet and ultimately, hopefully, is going to lose his business as a result of it. Donald Trump and most other politicians engage in these things all the time. I've linked to another video of that's full of examples of politicians, not just Trump, but politicians making use of rhetorical fallacies at, just right, left, and center. And then, of course, if you've heard of the Central Park Five, which I'm sure that for some of you that's way past outside of your knowledge. It's an issue that took place in the 80s, but we've since had I think a documentary on Netflix, and there has been all kinds of reporting on the Central Park Five. And it was a group of black teenagers who were sent to jail for a good little bit of time on a false accusation. It turned out they weren't the ones who actually did the crime. But Google it and read up on it, and you'll see that that too is an example of the ways in which some folks don't argue in good faith. Always be on the lookout for this sort of thing. If you see it, you should know, okay, this person is not arguing in good faith. And from that point, you can kind of determine, okay, is this somebody I really want to engage with? Is this somebody that I can persuade using logic? Did they use logic to get into their belief system? Or did they use something else? That can be a really good red flag to help you determine whether or not this is someone who can really be debated with in good faith. Here are some things to ask yourself and pose as you are writing. Pose the questions of your resource that you are analyzing. What's the subject that they're discussing? You want to make sure that you at least give a summary, a very brief summary of what the piece is about. Who's the author and what do you know about them? Do they have a history of really good arguments and not falling victim to any sorts of shenanigans with rhetorical fallacies? Are they trustworthy? Are they objective? Do they have an agenda that they're chasing down? There's nothing wrong with having an agenda, but you have to be really aware of that and alert to that as you are considering what somebody has to say. Who are the readers of the argument? Who is the expected audience? And who's the intended audience? Will they be swayed or will they not? What's the purpose of the work? What's the author trying to achieve and get done through their text? What are the time, space, place considerations and influences of the writer? Things are very different now, comparatively speaking, to even just when I was a kid and coming up and seeing politicians and people argue on TV. Context is everything. It is so important to get some understanding of the time period and the things that were going on at the time. I think that when people look back on the things that were written during COVID, they're going to need to have some kind of understanding of what it was like to go through a pandemic in the time of social media, because we've had pandemics before, but never with social media on, in our back pockets like we did this time. And finally, the most important, what specific techniques has the writer made use of? And most importantly, were these techniques successful? Were they questionable? Do you think they would have made their point better if they had relied more on this one instead of that one? And why? You'll need to have a thesis statement. But this is going to be a slightly different type of thesis statement because your argument is much more insular, I guess you would say. You're not going to be pointing to any resource other than the text you are analyzing. And before I go any further, I want to go back and say, if you want some extra credit, please send me in an email the definition for one of these terms that's listed here on this page. Okay, so back to the thesis statement. You want to make sure that you focus on what the essay says. You want to make sure that you point to places in the essay where they do things, or maybe they don't do something thoroughly, and they back up what you're saying. So for this genre of writing, you will want your thesis statement to focus on what the essay argues and whether or not it is successful. You're not arguing whether or not the text is good or bad, because those are personal judgment calls. They're not fact-based things that you might enjoy an essay and your neighbor might say, wow, this was some really crappy writing. So it really depends on what you're trying to get done. These are some examples, these two right here. These right here are two thesis statements. They were both largely taken from the text that I've linked to right here. So I don't want you to think that I wrote them on my own. These were thesis statements that I largely took from that piece of writing. And please look at them and pay specific attention to how they are structured and what they're saying. In her essay, Smith successfully argues for lowering the voting age through her careful use of statistics, studies, and personal knowledge. However, her argument is weakened by her lack of strong academic tone and voice. So that is a careful, nuanced thesis statement that's basically saying, yes, this person is arguing this thing and they did it well, but they shot themselves in the foot because they did this other thing over here, and that didn't really help them. So if you want to see a little bit more about thesis statements within a rhetorical analysis, this link will get you there. I will also post this PDF on our website. Okay, so that in a nutshell are the important things that you want to take from that reading, especially as it pertains to the assignment that you've got for this week. All right, I hope you have a great week, and I will see you later.